This is looking promising.
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Oh, excellent. That's super.
And is that, oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So it will send folks there. Do know now we are on live. So everybody, you're live on YouTube right now for the public. But it won't send people proactively there until we exceed our 500 limit.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, Michael Dougherty, I'm sorry, Michael Cummins, do you see anybody else in the waiting room from our Indivisible team?
Let me check real quick.
Let's just make sure we got everybody in here.
I see Gina. I'm going to admit Gina.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Gina in. I see Karen McClurg.
There's Gina.
Okay, I don't.
How many do we have out there so far? We've got 71. So we're totally fine. Just to clue you in, I just before we started this Zoom meeting, I had a little fear. I thought, oh gosh, what if Mike Dougherty, our keynote, and then also you, Spencer, what if you guys didn't join until closer to 5 o'clock and we already had 500 people and maybe you wouldn't be able to join because you'd be sent to YouTube. Not sure exactly how that works, but glad that you are on the call and it's all going to work.
Glad to be here, Robin. Yeah, I was telling Senator Gonzalez recently about like how every virtual event I've ever done, I get this like anxiety and this like stress of like what's gonna like not work. And she reminded me like, Spencer, you're stressed because you care and you want things to go well. And that's why things always do go well. So it's fine.
That's true. That's true. Karen, thanks for joining us. And Lorna, we're glad you're on the call with us. We are going to let everybody else in a little in about 4 minutes, but we happen to grab you. And so you're well. This is just us getting ready like we do before any one of our statewide calls. So you're getting the inside scoop here. And Jenna, I see you're in here too. So glad to have you on the call. Does
Hi,
anybody
Karen,
have
Jenna.
any concerns or questions? We've got 3 minutes before we let everyone in.
Just in terms of speaking order, Robin, you're kicking things off and then passing to me pretty soon. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how we'll do it. I have a few announcements. I'm going to finish all my announcements. I'll pass off to you. And then Spencer, when you're done, you can, no, you'll pass off to me because I'll introduce Michael Dougherty.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Quick question for you. I'll share my screen whenever you tell me that's okay. And then second question, how long do I have to go?
So we have we really aim to finish at 7. If you could aim to finish your presentation, your formal presentation by maybe 6:45, and then what we'll do is Linda's going to help me and we're going to pick questions from the chat. And then we'll ask you some of those questions and that should take about, 10 or 15 minutes. So if you wrap up around 6:45, yeah, then that would leave us plenty of time for questions. And if you finish early, it's okay. We don't have to stay on till 7, but however it works.
I appreciate it. I'm actually at a caucus site tonight. So I'm not talking about the campaign with attendees, but I'll tell you, they've told me I can go on at 7. If for some reason they come running in the room and they say you're on right now, you may see me make a quick exit. But I think we've worked it all out. I think I'm all set.
Okay, are you at Broomfield?
Yes.
You're last on the speaking order, if that helps. My political director just texted me the speaking order. So
that is great. Thank you, Spencer.
No problem.
And Michael, I'm sure that Carol shared this with you, but we're here tonight to talk about ICE and in your capacity as district attorney. So we're not gonna we can't do the campaign stuff. Just the DA stuff.
100%. I appreciate.
That should be enough, I'm sure.
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
That is why I'm here. So I appreciate you reminding me, and I went back and checked the emails today to make sure I was set on that. And this is not a campaign thing. This is us all fighting for our immigrant communities.
That's absolutely right. And we appreciate it. We appreciate you
Sure.
speaking. Okay, so it looks like it's 5:59 and Michael Cummins, do you want to let everybody in? I think we're about ready.
Do you want to,
Okay.
you want to start the recording, Robin? Or you want me to?
Oh, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Yes, Linda.
Okay, we are recording.
Okay.
Opened.
All right. Welcome. Hello, everybody. We're glad you're here tonight. My name is Robin, and I am the Indivisible Colorado facilitator. And so tonight's call is all going to be about keeping Colorado safe from ICE. But before we start that, I'm going to go ahead and just like we do every time we do our Colorado statewide call, I'm going to share some announcements with you. While I'm doing that, let me start by asking everybody if you're not on mute, please go on mute right now. And we're just going to stay on mute the whole call. The only folks who are going to talk are the speakers. And also, if you guys could put your, if you're in an indivisible, if you're in a local group, we would love to know where you live. So share, if you're in a group and which group you're from. If you're here from and you're not in indivisible, you are very welcome on this call. This call is for folks across our Colorado community. And if you are interested in joining in a local indivisible group, please put that in the chat, and hopefully there will be somebody from your town who can direct you in the right way. So use the chat as a way to and so let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. So be patient with me while I get this set up here. And I'll start with some announcements.
There's a spark of hope in the Lone Star State tonight. You'll see Noel Tallarico gets to start his general election campaign in just a few moments from that podium.
I'm hoping that we can all put our selves on mute. Okay, are you guys able to see?
Line through it.
Some announcements.
Robin, don't get too fast. We got a bunch of people still joining.
Okay. Okay.
Could have months ago against the end. He now says he will out.
We just had a little glitch there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to share my screen. Instead, I'm just going to talk everybody through this. So let me go ahead and spotlight myself. Okay. And can you guys be a little bit patient while I figure this out here?
Okay, that's what stopping this. Okay, there's a message from Rosie.
So I am hearing somebody talk about a message from Rosie, and it would be really super. You guys could all
Okay.
While you guys do that, thank you for being so patient with me. I actually kicked myself off the call and closed the presentation. So I appreciate you guys all being patient with me while I bring it back up here and get this thing figured out. While I'm doing this, I'm hoping you can use this time to hop on the chat, introduce yourselves, and connect with each other. So if you're All right, we need folks to put yourselves on mute, please. Just make sure that so I did see one person in the chat say that they can't hear anything. Is that true, or can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
All right.
I can hear you.
All right.
Do you want us muted or unmuted?
I would like everybody who is not a presenter to go on mute. That would be really helpful. Like right now I can hear somebody with like some background, sounds like a video or something that someone is listening to. Michael Cummins, if you are able, or Linda, if you're able to mute people, if you see that they're not muted, if you could take care of that. All right, so again, I really appreciate your guys' patience with me. I'm just going to go through my presentation. I don't want to share it because the last time I did that, I had some technical issues. We are recording this call. You will email the recording and the links to you after the call. You know who you are because you've registered with us. The biggest thing I want to remind folks of now is I can still hear some folks out there that are not on mute. So if that's you, please put yourself on mute. Thank you. There you go. That's much better. If you're a journalist on the call, you're very welcome. Please identify yourself in the chat, and everything that we say tonight is going to be off the record. And then this is how we're going to do it, just like we always do all of our calls. We are going to we're going to do some announcements, and then when we get to the main speaker, I know you guys will have questions. Please put those questions in the chat. We are collecting them, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end, and we will we'll ask those questions to District Attorney Dougherty. So so that's the agenda. And the first thing I wanted to share with you is March 28th. I hope you guys are all signed up for the No Kings protest. The website is nokings.org. If you are an organizer of this, if you're a group leader and you're trying to get yourself on the map, and if you are having some delays with that, please know that there's just some extra vetting that has gone into that. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to get on the map. So just keep watching for that. And if you don't see an event near you quite yet, come back to the map in a few days. It's just going to be a little bit delayed. I wanted to make an announcement about the graduated income tax ballot initiative. If you were on one of our last statewide call, we talked a lot about the ballot initiative that will help. It will raise $2 to $3 billion in revenue. And it's going to come from the wealthiest Coloradans. These are folks who make over $500,000 a year. And we would be able to use that money for healthcare, K through 12 education, and childcare. This is really important to me because I see that the Trump and Republicans with their the HR 1 bill that passed this summer, the big beautiful bill that's really going to pull a lot of money out of Colorado. And we have a Colorado budget issue anyway. So we need to solve this. We need to do something about this so that Trump doesn't have this fiscal leverage around our necks. So a super important ballot initiative. I'm going to put in the chat when I'm done talking. I will put links that you can learn more about it, and you can even get trained to carry a petition. I would love it if we have petition carriers at every No Kings event across the state, and so that we can get the signatures, enough signatures to get it on the ballot. So that's the graduated income tax ballot initiative. And then finally, I wanted to share the good news that if you're an Indivisible, you probably already know about this, but our Indivisible Colorado team endorsed Julie Gonzalez for the U.S. Senate race. And so we're super excited about Julie. We have, in just a minute, I'm going to turn you over to Julie's campaign manager. But I wanted to share and I'm sure he'll tell you this too, but there's 3 ways we're hoping you can support Julie. One is to attend a caucus and caucus for her. One is to sign up on her campaign website to volunteer for her. And then, of course, you can donate. And then I just want to remind folks that Indivisible Colorado did this by taking a vote of the membership across the state. But if you're in a local Indivisible group and if you prefer a different candidate, we never tell you guys what to do. If your group doesn't want to participate in this, we never tell local groups what to do. So that's all I have to share tonight. Thank you for being patient with all the technical glitches. I'm going to go off spotlight and I'm going to introduce you to Spencer Carnes, who is Julie Gonzalez's campaign manager. So thank you for being here, Spencer.
Thank you, Robin. So appreciate you inviting me to hop on the Zoom tonight. And our team is so appreciative and thankful to the Indivisible Colorado Action Network for your endorsement. For those of you who are already on Team Julie, it's so good to connect with you all. Thank you so much for your support and thank you for being on the Zoom tonight, because it takes time and commitment to show up, but commitment and showing up is what it takes to stand up to fascism, what it's going to take to stand up to Donald Trump, and it's what it's going to take to achieve economic and social and racial justice in this country. And so we're very thankful to be in community with you all. We're thankful to have your support. Real quickly, if you haven't made up your mind about who you're supporting in the U.S. Senate race this year, to tell you just real briefly about Julie and our campaign. Julie's a state senator. She represents Northwest and downtown Denver in the state Senate. She's been in the state Senate for 8 years, and in those 8 years, she has passed, not just introduced, but passed 196 pieces of legislation. They're pieces of legislation that impact our lives every day. They range from the Colorado Voting Rights Act, which makes it easier for us to participate in democracy, the Reproductive Health Equity Act, which guarantees the right to abortion and reproductive care in Colorado. She has secured over $500 million of clean air and affordable housing investments, and she's been a real champion for working families here in Colorado. And as a U.S. Senator, she's going to bring that track record to D.C. by supporting Medicare for all, affordable housing for all, universal child care, and so many other important progressive policies that we need to be standing for in order to fight back against fascism and Donald Trump and the Republicans. So very, very thankful for your support. Very, very thankful to be here tonight. Robin gave me a couple of missions. First of all, I want to tell you about some good news from our campaign to kind of frame the race right now. Obviously, we are going up against an incumbent Democratic senator, and he's got very high name recognition. A lot of people know who our opponent is. With that said, a lot of people know who Julie is too. So we got a poll this week that shows us that we're making really good progress in this race and that we have a strong reason to believe that there is a good path to victory. I won't go into the details too much. The poll was released by the Working Families Party, and I don't have more details than what's out there in the news and online. But the bottom line is this. When candidates hear fair messages about this campaign, when candidates hear a biography of Senator Hickenlooper and when they hear a biography of Senator Gonzalez, when they hear positive and negative messaging about both candidates, saying what each candidate is fighting for and what concerns have been raised about each candidate in the past, we run the numbers. The results of that poll say that Julie Gonzalez has the support of 40% of Democratic primary voters compared to Senator Hickenlooper's 33%. Bottom line is that if our message reaches the voters who are going to participate in the June 30th primary, then we have a very good shot to winning. But I'll be honest with you, there's an if there, right? In order to reach voters, our campaign needs to do the work to make the case about why Julie is the right person to be our next U.S. Senator. And in order for our campaign to make that, to bring that message to the voters, we need a couple of things. And Robin mentioned them. Number one, I'm a campaign manager, but I come from organizing world. And I believe that every campaign relies upon its volunteers and the grassroots energy to connect with voters where they are at. And so my first ask for you tonight is, if you haven't already, we would love for you to come volunteer with our campaign. If you go to julieforcolorado.com, and I'll drop that link in the chat in a moment, but julieforcolorado.com, click volunteer, and our organizing team will touch base with you within 24 hours guaranteed. succeed. We want to make sure it's easy to plug in with our campaign and help us do the work of getting Julie's message out across the state of Colorado. So that's ask number one. We need you to volunteer. Ask number two, it's caucus. Last night, Denver and a couple of other counties had their precinct caucuses. I know that Broomfield and a few other places are going tonight. And then the bulk of caucuses are happening either tomorrow and then largely on Saturday as well. So if you've never participated in a caucus before and you might have heard about what it is, don't worry. It's not quite as complicated as it sounds. The number one thing to participating in a caucus is showing up. Some of these caucuses happen in person while others happen virtual. That depends on the county that you're in. But I have two really great resources that make it super easy for you to participate in your caucus. You can either go to coloradodems.org/caucus. That website lists out every single caucus happening in the state, telling you in your county, are you virtual? Are you in person? What day is it happening? Great resource. Or if you want a little bit of extra help, you can go to our website, julieforcolorado.com. At the very top, there's a link that says learn more about your caucus. Fill out a little form and you'll get automated reminders from our campaign about where and when you need to be. So you go on there and say, I live in Superior, Colorado. I picked Superior because that's where I'm from originally. And our campaign will send you automated reminders of you need to show up at Monarch High School on this date at this time. So that's piece number one, is show up. I will say the caucus this year is a little bit different. The number one thing to know is that if you really want your support for candidates, including Julie, to matter, then we need you to run to be a delegate to your county assembly. A lot of county assemblies happen a few days after the caucus, and in some instances, you got to show up twice. But like I said at the beginning of my remarks, this is a time when we need to show up and fight for the things that we believe in. So if you go to caucus, do everything you can to get elected as a delegate to support Julie and other great candidates up and down the ballot. And then if you are really invested at your county assembly, you need to show up, you need to get elected as a state delegate so that you can go to the state assembly in Pueblo on March 28th, the same day as the No Kings rally, which I will say, I think the No Kings rally in Pueblo is going to be pretty exciting. But we need you to show up and be a delegate to the state assembly on March 28th so that you can cast your ballot for Julie. All of that means that we're going to be able to continue on in this campaign. I feel very confident that we're going to get the 30% that we need in order to continue on and go to the June 30th primary, but we need your support. This isn't just going to happen magically. We need folks to show up in caucus, and we need you to run to be a delegate. And use the link on our website, julieforcolorado.com, to learn more about exactly how to do that. And Robin, if you have some questions about caucus that I can answer, I'm happy to do those after I make my last pitch. Robin mentioned that as supporters of our campaign, we need your investment. We need your time, treasure, and talent. And so with that in mind, if you are in a position to donate to the campaign, we greatly appreciate it. It's going to help us get to that. It's going to help us live up to those numbers that were in the poll. It's going to help us get our message to voters in a lot of different ways, whether that's knocking on doors, running ads on social media, sending out text messages to make sure that likely primary voters know who Julie is and what she stands for, and that she is the progressive choice in this race. I will also say this is a new announcement. I saved it for the Indivisible call tonight. Just a couple of hours ago, our campaign launched a merch store. So if you go to store.julieforcolorado.com, or if you just go to our website and click on merch, we've got t-shirts, we've got buttons, we've got crew neck sweaters, and my personal favorite, we have an Abolish Ice mug, which I think is going to be a hit. But if you're feeling interested in investing in our campaign, but you want a little bit of merch, you want a yard sign, you want a button, head over to our website, click merch, and we'll get you some merch out there, and we appreciate your support. So Robin, I think that's about it for me tonight. Definitely want to pass it over to DA Dougherty when y'all are ready so that you can get into this very important Know Your Rights training. But with that said, just want to check, Robin, did you have any other questions for me? Anything else you wanted me to touch base on tonight?
I don't, Spencer, and thank you for sharing all of this with us and coming on. Very much appreciated.
Super
Okay.
appreciate the opportunity to be with Grassroots and with you all, and thank you again for your support.
You betcha. All right. So I am super, I hear the energy. You guys want to talk, you want to hear from District Attorney Michael Dougherty on keeping Colorado safe from ICE. So I'm not even gonna do too much more. Let me just spotlight you here, DA Dougherty. And I'm just gonna turn it right over to you because I know our audience is very eager to hear from you. are you?
I think you have to unmute him, Robin,
Yeah, let's see here. Hang tight.
or spotlight him.
Well, I did spotlight him. Thanks everybody for being so patient.
Well, good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. The host did a great job of keeping us all muted, but thank you for letting me unmute to give this presentation. I really appreciate Robin and all the organizers bringing us here together tonight. I'm Michael Dougherty. I'm the District Attorney for Boulder County, and I'm coming to you to talk about immigrant protection, the laws we have in place here in Colorado. I'll just tell you very briefly about my experience and what brings me to this presentation. But I'm so excited. We have hundreds of people on this call because the fight is on right now. I've been a prosecutor my entire career. I'm the proud grandson of Irish immigrants who came over on the boat with nothing but the shirts on their backs and settled in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I was born. In a lot of ways, it's the embodiment of the American dream. They came here for the freedoms and opportunities our country offered to them then, a path that is denied to so many now. And I'm very humbled and honored by the fact that I'm an elected district attorney appearing with you this evening. My grandparents arrived here not so many years ago, so I'm always passionate about immigrant protection. I've been working on it for years. I was a prosecutor at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for 13 years. I specialized in sex crimes and homicides and hate crimes. And then I went and managed the office of 1,300 people before moving to the great state of Colorado. Shortly after I arrived in Colorado, I was put in charge of the entire criminal section for the Attorney General's office. In that role, I've handled cases all around the state, including environmental crimes, public corruption, election fraud, homicide cases, and financial fraud. And for the last 8 years, I've had the honor of being the district attorney of Boulder County. And for the last 8 years, we've had an immigrant protection program here in Boulder County. And I'll tell you more about that as we go through the presentation. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen with all of you. Can you see the screen, Robin?
Yes.
You should see the PowerPoint on the screen now. I'm going to take questions at the end because it'd be hard to manage with this many people, the questions as we go through, but I'll definitely leave time. This picture hangs across the office from me in the district attorney's office. The gentleman on the left is my dad. He was a public school teacher and later went on to become a principal. The gentleman on the right is my grandpa, Michael Dougherty, and my grandpa's in the classroom on this day for Immigrant Day. And on the right-hand side of the chalkboard, you could see names listed. Those are the names of other immigrants who are being invited in to talk about why they came to this country and to celebrate the fact that America was what drew them here, to leave behind their families and to leave behind the connections they had to come here for a better life. And on the left-hand side of the chalkboard is the poem by Emma Lazarus, which welcomed people coming across on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. To me, this photo inspires me because of their journey, but also inspires me today to stand up and fight against ICE and to protect immigrants in our communities. Because today I'm going to talk to you about whether ICE needs a judicially approved warrant to enter our public schools. We need to harken back to the days where immigrants were celebrated because they are part of our past, present, and future in this country. So I'm going to talk about the role of ICE, the protections we have in place in Colorado, which are actually a lot and more than other states, and then how we make sure those protections are honored. We do that by spreading the word about them so people are aware of the legal protections we have in Colorado, but also making sure that there are consequences when they're violated. So I'll talk about how to protest safely, as well as the authority of state and local law enforcement and prosecutors in responding to reports of misconduct. ICE has been in place for over 23 years now. I'll talk briefly about their funding and their mission. The key part of this presentation is you're here because you are, I imagine, incredibly concerned about immigrants in our community and the threat against our democracy and the rule of law that we have from this lawless Trump administration. I'm right there with you. But I also want to leave us with some positive takeaways, including how we can continue to protest. Robin spoke at the beginning about No King's Day. And I think if you're not at the State Assembly, I saw a bunch in the chat about that. You being at the No King's Day is a great place to be because the voice of the people, the power of the people still makes a difference. Also legislation. continuing to support legislation that is now being introduced at the Capitol to expand the protections that we expanded upon last year in protection of immigrants, and in the courts, where the rule of law is the only thing we have going for us. It's the bulwark against the Trump administration. And as someone who's been a prosecutor for my entire career, to me, it's something I'm passionate about. I've handled the King Soopers mass murder case. I'm prosecuting the Pearl Street firebombing case. I've handled cases for the last 29 years, and I'll always look to the rule of law to help protect us. But also, how do we build a better future given what we're facing in our country and our democracy right now? So in my office, we have an immigrant protection program. The part I wanted to stress about this is since 2018, this program's been in place. And as part of it, all 9 of the law enforcement agencies in Boulder County since 2018 have agreed to never ask anyone their status in this country. So if they pull someone over for a traffic stop or respond to a domestic violence call, they never ask anybody their status. And when we find out, when law enforcement or prosecutors find out, we, since 2018, have never reported it to the federal government because our role is public safety. And I think you'd agree with me that when a domestic violence victim is assaulted, they should be able to call 911 and have the police respond and go to the hospital for treatment and come to the Justice Center so the offender could be held fully accountable without fear that that 911 call is going to result in them and their kids being deported. But what I really want to highlight about that policy that we've had in place in 2018, it's now the law in the state of Colorado as a result of work we did last legislative session. So no member of law enforcement is allowed to ask for someone's status or to report it to the federal government absent a judicially approved warrant. We've been doing Know Your Rights presentations in Boulder County since 2018. And since last year, I've been doing them all around the state. So if you have a group and you want me to come or a member of my office to come and do a Know Your Rights presentation, we will come to any community in the state of Colorado. And my phone number is at the end of the presentation. You look like a great, reputable group of 443 people, so I'm trusting you don't abuse my cell phone number that you'll get at the end of the presentation. And I'll also include my email address. We have a U visa program. I'll talk about the legislative changes, and we have a plea policy in place for criminal cases with immigration consequences. So in other words, shoplift can trigger deportation proceedings. Other crimes at the exact same level of shoplift do not. So my prosecutors are instructed to consider the severe consequences of possible deportation when they're deciding what does justice require in a criminal case. This is a picture that we're all too familiar with. And I promise to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the fight to demand that ICE take down their mask. That can happen through the courts, and there are lawsuits underway, including by Attorney General Phil Weiser, or it can happen through the legislature. And there are bills being introduced, including here in Colorado, to demand that ICE take down their mask. And I will just say, having handled gang homicides in New York City as a prosecutor at the Manhattan DA's office and the King Soopers mass murder case, I've had the honor of working with many outstanding women and men in law enforcement for my entire 29-year career. They do not wear masks. This is being done to terrify and terrorize communities and to deny transparency and accountability for community members. So we have to demand they take down their mask. And I just want to touch on what happened in Minneapolis over the past couple months. First, it's clearly an act of retaliation by the federal government. I say that because Minneapolis does not have a higher percentage of undocumented immigrants compared to other parts of the country. Minneapolis does not have a higher percentage of undocumented immigrants with criminal records. So I joined in a brief filed in federal district court in Minnesota demanding that the federal government provide an objective basis for being in Minneapolis and flooding that city with over 3,000 federal agents. I touched on masks. One thing I want to touch on is ICE received $45 billion with a B dollars last year in the federal budget. They are now the largest federally funded law enforcement agency in the entire country. That is in part because they're going to sweep up people who are not, as they put it, the worst or have criminal records, but also so that they could build private prisons, which to me are outrageous and a complete failure. And private prisons should be banned in the United States of America. And we should start by banning them through the legislature here in Colorado, because we actually have 2 state facilities that are run by for-profit companies. One is in Bent County and the other is in Crowley County. And not surprisingly, because for-profit companies have every reason to put the money back in their pocket as profit, as opposed to in the care and treatment of those in their custody, those facilities have higher rates of staff turnover, inmate abuse, and lower rates of successful rehabilitation. And when it comes to our immigrants, we should not accept that we're having private prisons built in the United States. Where cities have been successful in denying private prisons in their communities is when people have shown up and protest. So that's made a difference. Also, local communities, including in Kansas, have denied ICE permits for water and electricity to reopen and to have a private prison up and running. And the Attorney General can represent those cities and local communities. One other thing I'd like to see us do in Colorado on private prisons is this. In 2017, in California, the legislature passed a law allowing the Attorney General to have access to private prisons to conduct inspections and therefore be able to bring civil rights suits or criminal actions against ICE and the private prison companies if they're violating the rights of the immigrants detained there. So that's something I'd love to see us put on the docket, as we say, for the legislature here in Colorado. But also in Minneapolis, what happened was obviously tragic and horrific, and to me, maddening. Tragic and horrific for all the reasons you know, and we've watched those videos over and over again. To me, maddening because as the district attorney of Boulder County, it's my responsibility to oversee an independent, thorough investigation anytime police officers use deadly force against another. That's the exact opposite of what happened in Minneapolis, where you had the federal government officials announcing that the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy were justified before any investigation got underway, not allowing access to the crime scene, taking away witnesses and evidence. Clearly, they were not intending, nor do we have any reason to be confident in their ability to conduct an independent investigation. So last week, I joined with District Attorney Brian Mason, who's the District Attorney for Adams and Broomfield counties, and we wrote an op-ed that was published in the Daily Camera saying the following, which is until Congress gets their act together and requires ICE to have more training and more requirements around body-worn cameras and independent investigations, it's going to fall on state and local prosecutors to conduct those investigations with local law enforcement. Because no one is above the law, and ICE has to be, and I promise you will be, held fully accountable for the crimes they commit. I've prosecuted police officers, I've prosecuted politicians, including of my own party. Doing justice means doing it without fear or favor, and what they were doing in Minneapolis is, to me, just a complete failure of that. We need full investigations and consequences. I'll just touch briefly on this, but to me, birthright citizenship and Trump's order to revoke it was really the start. He took office the second time, and on the day he took the oath to uphold the Constitution, he also issued an executive order revoking birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship, as you see in that first bullet point, is in the plain language of the U.S. Constitution. If you don't agree with me on that, well, if you don't agree with me on that, you're probably not on this call. But if you don't agree with me on that, you can look at this U.S. Supreme Court case from 1898, which reaffirmed that birthright citizenship is, in fact, a constitutional right. And if you don't agree with me and the U.S. Supreme Court, what I would say is this, which is thousands of people have based their lives and their families around birthright citizenship being a constitutional protection. The only thing that stopped them from being rounded up and deported without due process was attorneys general from around the country filing lawsuits that are now making their way through the court system. One of those federal district court judges I referenced in this third bullet point on the slide, appointed by Ronald Reagan on the bench for over 40 years, he explained, I can't remember another case where the question presented was as clear. This order to revoke birthright citizenship is blatantly unconstitutional. So I have hope. I'm optimistic that the U.S. Supreme Court will go our way on this, but that case is actually, obviously going to be an incredibly powerful and impactful decision for so many. So there are protections we have in place, though. And I'm going to go through some of those protections now. One is around courthouses, where ICE is prohibited from making any civil immigration arrest in or around courthouses. And you see for each one of these things, I include the statutory citation in case you want to look it up. All these materials are also on my website, so you don't need to write them down. And I'll share the PowerPoint with Robin, and she can send it out, post on a website, whatever's easier. But the point is, I include the statutory citation. So if you're talking to members of law enforcement in your community or your district attorney, you can point to these statutes for the conversation. There are sanctions available if ICE arrests someone in or around a courthouse. The individual who's arrested could bring a civil action for false imprisonment. The district attorney and chief judge can issue a contempt of court order against the ICE agent or ICE as an agency. And also the attorney general can bring a civil action on behalf of the person or the state. So we have protections in place for courthouses and the surrounding areas. So for traffic stops, immigrants should pull over. They're protected under the law. Local law enforcement can ask them their status. They can also then come to the court to address their tickets. Same with domestic violence victims and witnesses to criminal conduct. And I always want to highlight this because we have so many people who are hiding in the shadows right now because they fear coming to the courthouses or contacting law enforcement. So we should do our best to spread the word in our communities so that victims of domestic violence, sex assault, know that they can come to the courthouse. One thing I would stress is I've done a lot of these presentations and I've had a lot of these conversations over the years as district attorney since 2018. Not everybody sees immigration the same way that I do, but no one's ever disagreed with me on that question I asked earlier about should a domestic violence victim be able to call 911 without fear of deportation. I also always stress when ICE claims that they're enhancing public safety by arresting and deporting people who have pending criminal charges, they call that public safety. I call that a public failure. So for example, if you have someone charged with sex assault on a child and ICE swoops in while the case is pending and deports that person, the victim never has justice. The family never has their day in court. There are no criminal consequences. And yes, the person's deported, but it's not as though they're deported and being sentenced to prison in another country. They remain free. So even for people who have the complete opposite view on immigration, to me, these are things that I ask and push because I do think we have some areas of common understanding and agreement when we talk about it. One area where I think the Trump administration, well, there's many areas actually, but one area where I think the Trump administration did the absolute wrong thing was immediately after he took office the second time, he revoked a prior executive order that protected sensitive locations, including schools and hospitals. That would have allowed ICE to target enforcement efforts in childcare facilities, healthcare facilities, and schools. So I'm proud to live and work in a state and be a part of the effort to address this. And we did with Senate Bill 276. Now ICE is prohibited under state law from making any immigration-related arrest in or around hospitals. And under the statute, there's a long list of what qualifies as a related facility. So not just hospitals, but urgent care, treatment facilities, rehab facilities, therapist office, and so on. Those are all protected spaces under Colorado law. And sections in place if ICE that protection. So that's for medical care, because someone should be able to go for medical care without fear that they or their kids are going to be deported. Also, we now have in place protections for schools and childcare centers and public libraries so that people can take their kids and have them being taken care of, but also go for their education without fear they're going to be deported when they're at the school. ICE has to have a judicially approved warrant to enter the non-public areas of any one of these locations on that screen, including public schools. When I say judicially approved warrant, and I'll say it a few more times in this presentation, it has to say warrant at the top and be signed by a judge or magistrate judge at the bottom. It's not a letter, it's not a detainer, it's not an administrative warrant. It has to be a judicially approved warrant. And I have samples I can send you if you like. And again, my email will be on the final slide. A couple other highlights from Senate Bill 276. The first, and perhaps most importantly, is it limits any public institution from sharing information with ICE absent court order. So if someone walks into the public library in your community tonight and says, hey, I want to find out more about Joe Smith, the staff of the library cannot turn over any information or provide any information absent a court order. Also, it extended the protections that immigrants have if they pled guilty on a case, criminal case of any kind at any level, and were not informed of the possible immigration consequences. So in criminal court, if you walk in any criminal court in Colorado, you'll hear the judge ask a number of questions when someone pleads guilty. One of those questions has to be, are you aware of possible immigration consequences? And then have you talked to your attorney about those? If that did not happen, the individual can get their guilty plea back. In other words, reopen and relitigate the case and go forward with it. Also, and here's an important one, jails are no longer permitted to hold people so that ICE can arrive. Previously, ICE would say, call us and we'll come get the person, just hold on to them. We'll come pick them up. That is now a new and unconstitutional arrest, which makes sense. If you take a step back and think about it, let's say Robin's sibling is arrested tonight. Hope I'm not jinxing you and your family, Robin, but let's say sibling is arrested tonight. Robin goes to the jail tomorrow with the bond money. The jail couldn't say, you should come back on Monday because we're really busy. We're just going to hold on to them for longer. This makes clear that if a jail does that for ICE, it's an unconstitutional arrest. It also prohibits any part of the criminal justice system, any agency within the justice system, from assisting or cooperating with ICE. This is why several months ago, as you may recall, when a Mesa County Sheriff's deputy pulled over a young woman traveling from Utah to Denver, he conspired with ICE via text message, and they then pulled her over and detained her for a possible immigration violation. That was an absolute violation of Senate Bill 276 and the state protections we have in place. When it was discovered, the Attorney General for Colorado brought a lawsuit against the Mesa County Sheriff's deputy. He is no longer in law enforcement. And I will say that sent a loud and clear message to law enforcement all around the state of Colorado. That's what it means to make sure that people are aware of the protections we have in place in Colorado, but also that there are consequences when they're violated. We're going to have to continue to pursue this kind of action and make sure there are consequences, because we see different things happening, for example, in Garfield County at the courthouse and with law enforcement in different parts of the state. I was invited to speak with a group and do this same presentation down in Walsenburg a couple Saturdays ago, where they have 1/3 of their community are immigrants, and law enforcement may not share the same view I do. But what they have to do is follow the law in the state of Colorado. So making sure that people are aware of the law that we have in place, the protections that exist, and that we're holding people responsible when they violate the law. Every agency that I've touched on has to have policies outlining what I've talked about, and that ICE is only able to get information when they have a warrant, which makes sense. So in the library example, if you have a 20-year-old young adult who's working at the library at night, I don't expect them to know the law around Senate Bill 276. But that's why Senate Bill 276 requires that the library have policies in place and that employees are informed of the policy prohibiting any information sharing with ICE. So let's talk briefly about the authority of ICE, because this will lead to a discussion on how to protest safely. So a couple of foundational matters. Federal officers enforce federal law. So ICE has the responsibility and the authority of enforcing immigration laws. Local police officers are the ones who enforce state and local laws. And here's where it gets perhaps more important. Federal officers can only perform local law enforcement functions, such as a traffic stop, if the state laws grant them that power. And in Colorado and in Minnesota, they do not. So for example, if ICE were driving down the street tonight and saw one of us speeding or go through a stop sign, they do not have the legal authority or power to pull us over for a traffic stop. This came to a head when Renee Good was killed, because you may recall people debating about whether they actually had the authority to stop her car or not. If it was a traffic stop, the answer is no, they do not. They can only take action against people who interfere with their operations. So that's why you heard from the Trump administration, their claim she was interfering with ICE. And that's why they tried to stop her car. Because legally, that's the only way they could stop her car, is if they could claim that she was interfering or obstructing what they were doing, or if someone assaults an officer. So Border Patrol is chiefly responsible, mainly responsible for borders and ports of entry. And then we have ICE enforcing civil immigration laws within the country. Couple key things for us here. So for ICE to take someone into custody, they do not need a warrant if they could satisfy two things. Both have to be present. One is that they have probable cause that they believe the person is subject to deportation. And the second, this is a key part of it, they have to be able to show the person's a flight risk. So there's currently a lawsuit pending in federal district court in Denver challenging ICE on this second piece, which is required to take anybody into custody, because they're picking up people who've been in the country 20 or 30 years, who have families, jobs, community ties. There's no way they could demonstrate that person's a flight risk. So if you want to follow that case, I encourage you to do so. Hans Meyer is the lead attorney on it. He and I team up for a lot of Know Your Rights presentations. He's a leading civil immigration attorney in Colorado. Also, ICE cannot enter a private space, such as a home, without warrants. To me, it's very scary that the federal government's entertaining that possibility because it's clearly a violation of the United States Constitution. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say U.S. citizens. It says individuals. It doesn't say you have to have citizenship to have the rights of the U.S. Constitution provided to you. I'm going to touch briefly on the training of ICE agents. So at the same time, well, I'll put it this way, to become a police officer in Colorado, you have to go through a training program that's actually overseen and determined by the Attorney General of Colorado. That training program is the same for every law enforcement agency in the state. So whether you're joining the Durango Police Department, Boulder County Sheriff's Office, or the Fort Morgan PD, the training is all the same. It's 18 weeks, followed by 18 weeks of field training at someone's agency. That's gotten longer over the years in Colorado, and law enforcement still makes mistakes and still gets things wrong. In the federal government, they've proudly announced that they're reducing the training for ICE. This is something where I really encourage you to reach out to the members of Congress for your respective congressional districts. They should be passing a law in Congress as to what the training requirements of ICE are. They shouldn't be shorter. They should, in fact, be much longer. Sorry. So that's one thing I'm really focused on. I was actually in Washington, D.C. recently with other district attorneys. We met with the respective members of Congress from Colorado, and this is something we talked about. And a couple of them were very interested in this and interested in trying to introduce legislation in Congress that will require a higher level of training for ICE. But I think the failure to train them at the same level we train state and local law enforcement in Colorado, the results of that are in plain sight and absolutely tragic. So some data on ICE arrest, and I actually need to change this slide, unfortunately, because this slide captures how many people that have been picked up by ICE were people who've been convicted of a crime, how many have been charged with a crime but not convicted, and how many have no criminal record whatsoever. So 33%, this data is from October, 33% had no criminal record and no criminal contact whatsoever. So I include this to push back against the false narrative coming from the Trump administration that they're going after the worst of the worst and people with criminal records. Now it's down to the percentage of people who have criminal records, criminal convictions has gone down from 37% to 14%. Less than 2% of those have gang ties. So we continue to hear this narrative about different gangs, including TDA and Aurora. That is an incredibly small sliver of the people who are being picked up and subject to deportation. So let's talk about some of the actions you could take in protesting in your community. You can film, but you cannot interfere. If you interfere or obstruct, you could be subject to arrest and prosecution. And also, as a prosecutor, I never want to see anybody getting hurt. So I really stress this. There's no magic number of feet you have to stand away. What I would say is thinking about, I'm a very goal-focused person. So thinking about if you go into a protest, what's my goal? Or if you're showing up and ICE is in the community, what's your goal? If it's to document, then I would encourage you to use your phone and record what's happening. And in a couple of slides, I'll talk about where you can send those videos when you see misconduct and what you can do when ICE shows up. But I would really encourage you not to stand between ICE and whoever they're targeting or going after. If you do film ICE, which I think is important to do, a warrant is required to seize your phone. They either have to have a warrant or consent. So for example, if a police officer, local, state, or federal, comes over and says, hey, can I have your phone? You are free to say no. And if they don't have your consent, they need a warrant signed by a judge to seize your phone. You can demand that ICE remove their mask and provide identification, but it's not yet required by state law or federal law. I'm optimistic that we'll get this bill passed this session, and then it would be required. You are, though, permitted to film vehicles and license plates. Under state law in Colorado, you're allowed to film any action by law enforcement, provided you don't interfere or obstruct law enforcement.
Michael, I just want to do a time.
This slide. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna.
We've got 12 minutes, but we want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A.
All right, buckle up. In 3 minutes, we're going to be done with this presentation. You ready? So what can business owners do? Really important point. Posting signs for private areas. So for example, you go in a diner, between the seating area and the kitchen, there should be a sign that says private employees only. That sign actually has legal significance. ICE needs a warrant to get past that threshold, to get past that sign. So if you have a business or a restaurant, construction site, whatever it might be, hotel, those signs can make a big difference. Also, training employees on the right to remain silent, having immigrant employees complete a prep kit. That'll help them in terms of people knowing what to do with their kids and their cars, their pets, and so on. But it also helps reduce the fee that an immigration attorney will charge. So having the prep kits, which I have available on my website, the district attorney website, and you can get them from Remain's website, and the acronym for Remain is RMIAN. Also, pay immigrants a fair wage. I always stress this. Regardless of who's in the White House, we should always make sure immigrants aren't being taken advantage of and being paid less than what they deserve. This flyer is available in English and Spanish on the district attorney website. The one thing I really wanted to stress about this flyer is about halfway down, you could see if you witness misconduct by ICE or other federal agents, you could report it to local law enforcement, district attorney's office, or attorney general's office. The AG's office now has an online portal where you could report these things. And I think that's really important. The other thing I would urge you to do is to call 911. Even if law enforcement doesn't share your view on immigration, they're going to show up in response to a 911 call. They'll have body-worn cameras on, and that's another opportunity to document what they're doing. That's my email address. I'll leave it on the slide for about 30 seconds, and then I'd love to stop sharing the screen so I could just see more faces. And that's my cell phone number. I kid you not, that's my personal cell phone number. So please don't call after an hour where you'd be waking up the rest of the Dougherty family. But Robin, I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions people have. And thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of the questions that we got from our audience. First one is, I'm worried about ICE using flock cameras when I peacefully protest expressing my First Amendment right to assemble and not be added to Trump's secret police data list. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So if you're worried about that, I would encourage you to support a bill that Judy Mobley out of Boulder County has introduced that would prohibit the use of flock cameras in the state of Colorado. Unlike other camera systems that we have in Colorado, flock allows access to ICE through other agencies. So for example, Boulder County Sheriff's Office, they can't simply flip an off switch and deny everybody access to flock. If they could, believe me, they would. So I encourage you to check out Judy Mobley's bill and to reach out to state legislators to say you want them to support it. That would limit or prohibit flock from allowing anybody to have access outside of that jurisdiction.
Okay. Next question. Should we use our personal phones, or should we get some other form of camera to record ICE activity?
I think either one is fine. If you're worried, you could get another camera, but I think using your phone is fine. It's entirely proper. It's protected by law, and just don't give it over if asked. And remember that they need a warrant to get it.
Okay. Please address why our state laws are not preempted by the federal actions of Trump.
Good question. So the Supremacy Clause allows for certain things the federal government to do that can't be blocked by the state. However, state laws and local ordinances are still in effect on some things. So there's not a complete overlap. So the easy example would be FBI agent goes home tonight in Denver and beats up his or her partner. They don't have immunity because they're a federal agent. That's an obvious example that the state laws that prohibit assault are still in effect, regardless of whether someone's a member of local, state, or federal law enforcement. ICE agents do not have absolute immunity. When the vice president said that, that was an absolute lie. Legally, ICE agents do not have absolute immunity.
Okay. Let's see. What other Colorado district attorneys are similarly positioning themselves around ICE actions?
Good question. So I know that there are a number that are. There are 23 elected district attorneys for the state of Colorado. If you're in a particular jurisdiction, you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk to you about it offline. But for example, Brian Mason, the district attorney for Adams and Broomfield counties, he's the one who joined me on that op-ed about requiring full investigations and consequences for criminal activity. And I would say all 23 of us, we don't agree on everything, but we're in full agreement that ICE should not be picking people up, victims or defendants, while criminal cases are pending. Beyond that, there might be some differences in how we view things, but we are united in that. We've been strong on that against ICE.
Okay, okay. How can we learn about where and when ICE will be so we can witness their activities?
So unfortunately, ICE will not notify local law enforcement and will not notify district attorneys before they come to a community. I actually reached out to ICE when all this started to at least ask them the question, and they confirmed what I had suspected, which they will not notify. But if you see ICE in the community, I would encourage you to call 911. One thing I would stress, though, I did this presentation recently with a Latino organization, and the director of the Latino organization said something that really struck me, which was she explained that when the false alarms go out, it's incredibly stressful for members of the Latino community. So to make sure we confirm that it's ICE and not a member of law enforcement, not an undercover detective, not someone from another agency. So doing what you can to confirm before you sound the alarm, I think, is important. But I would not hesitate to call 911 and see, is this local law enforcement in our community? I see a black Tahoe with lights on the top and a person with a gun. Is this your sheriff's office or is this the police department? And they'll answer that question for you.
Okay. And I think also, I'm not an expert, but I believe there are some experts on the phone. Thinking of you, Jenna, I believe there's also an ICE hotline that you can call if you suspect this. So Jenna, if you want to, you can pop that number in the chat. Okay, here's another question. Do HOAs have to cooperate with ICE? Can ICE enter
They
a
do
condo
not.
building without a warrant? Sorry.
To enter the building, they need a warrant, and HOAs do not have to cooperate, nor are they prohibited from cooperating.
Okay. If ICE enters a workplace with a subpoena to review I-9 employee records and files, what rights do businesses have and how to respond?
So I would encourage businesses to ask for a warrant. It's a judicially approved warrant that's actually required, not just simply a subpoena. So I would have an attorney who's available that you could contact. So telling ICE, I'm not going to give this to you. I'm going to call an attorney or call a rapid response network to get a fast response, but look for the warrant signed by the judge.
Okay. This is probably related. It says, can you comment on the concept of probable cause for ICE administrative warrants? How can they use it for an administrative warrant if the person they target has no criminal record?
So that's the subject of that federal district court lawsuit right now, because they need to have a reason to believe the person's subject to deportation and that the person's a flight risk. And that lawsuit that's been brought in federal district court in Denver is on behalf of a number of people who clearly were not, in my opinion, a flight risk because they have the same factors you just talked about. No criminal history, community ties, families in the area, jobs, and so on. So I'm really excited and hopeful for that lawsuit.
Okay. Is a probation office connected to the courthouse considered a protected place? We had an
Yes.
issue of ICE taking people from the probation office in Chaffee County with the possible help of the sheriff's department.
So that is not permitted, and I would encourage you to reach out to me offline if you want. I'm happy to talk about it further. That would be a violation of the state law.
What's to keep an ICE agent from signing a judicial warrant as a judge? How would we know?
Oh, well, good question. That would actually be a crime. So I'm not saying law enforcement, doesn't commit crimes, but they'd be putting themselves at serious risk and in jeopardy if they do that. So you should look at it, but then also when the case starts to move forward or the deportation starts to move forward, I would hope that someone would discover it and take immediate action because should be harsh consequences if that happens.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we've gotten through most of the questions and audience, we did not get them all. Thank you all for, such excellent engagement tonight. And District Attorney Dougherty, thank you very much for making time. I know that you're hopping onto a caucus now, so we wish you the best there.
Thank you.
Thank you for showing up for us, and attendees, thanks so much for your engagement. I will send the recording out within the next day or so, and then DA Dougherty, if you send me the deck, I'll also send that to the attendees.
Thank you so much. And Robin, I want to thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. I will say these conversations, as much as it's a scary time in our country, these conversations are what fill me with hope. There's a lot of energy around immigrant protection and standing and fighting for our democracy and our rule of law. And I'm reminded of Martin Luther King once said, the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice. And I appreciated President Obama recently adding something to it. President Obama said, that's true, but it does not bend by itself. So each one of us has to do everything we can to push. And I know you're doing that. I know that's why you're on this call. So let's keep doing it together. I'm committed to standing shoulder to shoulder with you and protecting immigrants and standing up and fighting for what's right. So thanks so much for allowing me to be here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I really appreciate it. Have a good night, all.
Thanks.